Okay, so Jordan is arguing to you that you cannot ground the values that would undergird the modality of increasing well-being in anything factual. And you are arguing in response that...
Not without an intermediary structure.
Let me just argue in response.
Hold on a second.
Not without an intermediary structure.
What I've heard you argue is something that I agree with, which is that you can ground many things in a nearly objective observation of the universe, but it doesn't say anything about the value part of the equation. And in fact, I think, having thought about the question from an evolutionary point of view, that in order to do what you're talking about, to increase well-being, you are going to have to accept that that is going to leave you with an arbitrary grounding. There is no absolute grounding for it, and you're going to have to just simply accept that it's going to make you arbitrary, that you are in fact going to have to do inconsistent things like decide to honor the love of a mother for her child and dishonor the love of country that causes one population to gas another population. That's inconsistent, and we need to embrace that kind of inconsistency.
I mean, it's just a different... I don't think that we even have the grounding problem. I think it's a pseudo-problem.
But you just said you needed to put your staff in somewhere.
We have a navigation... So the way it's grounded is the acknowledgement that what we have is... I mean, it's analogous to what people do with the notion of meaning in life. Like, what's the meaning of life? How do you find meaning in life? Or what's the purpose of life? These are bad questions. These are questions that, when you pose them, they seem to demand, they suggest a space in which an answer must be put, but it's just...
But you put an answer there. You said that people should work towards the good.
Yes, there's a different way of framing it, which is, what we have here is an opportunity. It's not a matter of meaning. It's not a matter of purpose. And it's not a matter of grounding. It's a matter of we are in a circumstance where we have consciousness and its contents in every moment. And all of this is, the lights are on, and they're on for reasons that we dimly understand, right? They're reasons that are biological in our case, but perhaps at bottom they're just based on information processing, and that they're platform independent. And then we would build machines for whom the light is actually on, or not, right? It remains to be seen whether we can actually build in our computers conscious minds that can thrive or suffer, right? And that the difference matters. But we're in this circumstance where we are trying to understand how consciousness and its states arises. But one thing that is undeniable is that the lights are on, and being on, they reveal a spectrum of experience that which has one end that the worse it gets, the more compelling it is to move away from it.
That's meaning. That's meaning right
there. Yes,
okay,
so and all of our meaning talk and value talk relates to navigating in this space. So there's one end of it where things get needlessly horrible without a silver lining, and there's another end where it gets better and better and non-zero sum, and all boats are rising with the same tide, and the Israelis and the Palestinians...
That's the landscape of evil and good.
Yeah,
so,
okay, so fine. What do you do? That's why, so these are compelling ways to talk about this space of navigation. I think we often live in the space where we know there's a right answer that we are too selfish to fulfill, or too short-sighted to fulfill. Like, so I know there are things I do every day that not only will other people as yet unborn wish I hadn't done, I might wake up tomorrow wishing I hadn't done those things, right? So like I'm a bad friend to my future self in some respect, to say nothing of the rest of humanity. So we can have we can have weakness of will, we can have failures that we can just be wrong about certain things, but it's nowhere written that it's easy to be a good person, right?
But in that case, it's not even clear what good means.
Well, no, it is clear. I'm saying even in those cases where we know the answer, it might be hard to be motivated by that knowledge, and that because we're not a unity, right? I mean, part of what wisdom is morally is an ability to live integrated enough with your own, better self. The advice you would give to a friend. I mean, this just falls right out of your work as well. It's like live as though, but basically treat yourself the way you would treat I think this is your line, so, someone you're responsible for, or there's someone, a friend of yours, right? If you can do that, you're already ahead of who most people are most of the time. But there's no reason to say that because it's difficult, or because sometimes we're looking through a glass darkly and can't figure out what the answer is, the answer doesn't exist, or there is no right one.
Okay. Now, let me try with you. Yeah. So, Jordan, you have argued for an evolved framework of religious belief in which there are elements that are morally defensible that will be carried through time. There are elements that are morally reprehensible that will be carried through time by virtue of the fact that they are effective. And you have argued that these things, because they have withstood the test of time, have some kind of value, which is not necessarily something that we should honor, but some large fraction of it must be. Mm-hmm. But that would seem to suggest that the degree to which these belief structures has value is contingent on the degree to which the environment in which we attempt to deploy these structures matches the environment in which they evolve.
Absolutely.
Now, I would argue that no population of humans has lived farther from its ancestral environment than we do.
Yeah, I think that's a fallacy.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because
well, it is and it isn't. And look, I think that's an absolutely valid point. Okay, so this gets esoteric relatively rapidly, but the question is, let's say at the highest levels of adaptation, we're adapted to the things that last the longest periods of time. Okay, those are the most permanent things. Now the question is, what are those most permanent things? And one answer would be the fundamental material substrate of the world. And that's true. I'm going to leave that be. Like, we're evolved to deal with gravity, okay? But there are other elements that are higher order abstractions in some sense that are also apparently hyper-real. So, for example, there's a problem that we have a bifurcated brain. The question is, well, why do we have a bifurcated brain? And the answer seems, and not just us, animals too, and the answer seems to be, well, there's two necessary ways of looking at the world, and they have to be in conflict to some degree in order to work properly. The right hemisphere mode and the left hemisphere mode. The right hemisphere mode is a lot more metaphorical than the left hemisphere mode. The right hemisphere is the hemisphere that seems to deal with exceptions to the rule. And it seems to deal with exceptions to the rule by treating them, by aggregating them, and then trying to recognize patterns that unite them as a corrective to the totalitarian system in some sense that the left hemisphere imposes. You could say that the right and the left are adapted for something like explored territory for the left and unexplored territory for the right. I've characterized that as order versus chaos. And I think the religious landscape is good versus evil, to Sam's point that we should strive for a good life, on a landscape of chaos versus order. And I think that landscape is permanent. Now, I know we've moved from our African ancestral homeland, but this underlying abstraction, this underlying reality is so profound that it maintains its validity across all sets of potential environmental transformations.
Well, okay.
Okay, can I just jump in here? Because here's why, just to seize on